Super excited. Hello, everyone. We'll just give it a quick minute to get started. In our pre-call, Donald and I had a really hard time getting through the material in the designated time. There's so much to cover, such an interesting human. So we will get started. Hi, I'm Edith Cooper, and I'm the co-founder of Medley. Medley is a group coaching platform. We curate groups of really interesting people who are focused as emerging leaders on interacting with others to learn and grow about themselves with and through others' inputs. I've always been passionate about learning from people's stories, and that's why I've launched Medley Moments. Medley Moments is a conversation series where I sit down and talk with incredible thought leaders who have inspired me both personally and professionally. And so today, I'm super excited to have Donald Knight join me in this Medley conversation. Donald has been in the people business for over 14 years. And in fact, what I've learned is he's kind of been focused on the people components of things for most of his life. Currently is leading the HR organization at Greenhouse. In fact, Donald is the first ever chief people officer at Greenhouse. Greenhouse, as I'm sure many of you know, is a recruiting software company. And I often say, because it is true, that talent acquisition and recruiting is at the center of gravity of most organizations' success. And Greenhouse is clearly at the center of that universe. He's had several senior people positions, including at Edelman and Equifax. And before we get started in the conversation today, which will really focus on winning with a people first philosophy, I'd like to pause for a moment and return to what I said earlier, which is it's all about your story. And Donald has quite an extensive set of experiences, but I know perhaps that there might be other things you'd want to add when you tell your story so that people can really understand who Donald Knight is. So Donald, welcome, and please tell us your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Edith, thank you for having me. And I love the name of your company, Medley. I think it speaks to the importance of folks being in harmony when it comes to the way humans interact, which is part of my story, right? My parents are both military. They both served in the Army. And so as a result, by the time I was 14, I had lived in 6 states in multiple countries. And, as a military brat, I kind of thought that was normal. Only until my parents retired that I realized that I had a very different American upbringing than most folks, and a very different upbringing than most African Americans. And so my entire life has been spent like building proximity with other humans because my best friends were either coming or going. I realized early on there's no such thing as a stranger. It's just someone you haven't met yet because my best friends were once strangers. And so when I think about that and then getting into the people business, HR just wasn't on my radar. I thought I was going to be an attorney. And there was a phenomenal human by the name of Kay Kennedy who helped shape me in telling me that, no, I think your outlook on life is different. And I think that's why you'll be able to be more impactful in the people space. And, you fast forward what feels like 1 year, but has been a lot longer than that. And my life has changed for the better. And I'm glad that I'm in the business of people, and I'm glad I get to coach people on how to interact with other humans. And a large portion of that also is part of my relationship as a father and as a husband, because my son is also watching to see how I interact and how his mother interacts with others, and taking those cues on how he should interact with other people as well. So
I thought it was super interesting and very important that in your high level profile on LinkedIn, you highlighted that you're Dylan's dad. That's keeping it real. That's basically saying upfront that it's about you personally and professionally in any kind of bio that you put forth. So people proximity, that was a super interesting way to phrase the human interaction that really fuels everything from individual growth to professional growth. And you're encouraged to get into the people space early in your career, but the transition from seeing yourself as a lawyer to really pursuing this career in talent broadly defined Tell us a little bit about that journey, and was it a straight line? What really informed your path to getting you to where you are today?
Yeah, great question. Far from a straight line, right? I knew since I was 12 years old, I told my mom I was going to be an attorney. Like I was committed to it. I knew what I was going to do, or at least I thought I did. And I took a business class um, in undergrad, and I liked business, but it didn't shift my thought process of being attorney. I was just like, oh, I'll just be a corporate attorney. Like I'll go do general counsel one day. Um, Really, folks like Diane Harris, Kay Kennedy really helped shape me in that regard because they were like, no, we see a shift happening in our profession that these things that people are calling soft skills, they're not soft skills, they're human skills. And those are going to be the things that are going to help businesses unlock people potential. And we see globalization happening where companies are turning into multinationals and looking at different locations where they can tap into different um, talent pipelines and communities. Um, and so they really helped shape this idea for me that diversity drives innovation because you need diversity of thought. And
Mm.
innovation drives revenue, revenue drives profit. And so if you want to reverse engineer the importance of the people business, it directly influences the amount of dollars companies are able to make. And so they were like, listen, you like business and you're thinking business, go attorney. No, don't do that. Go business, but go business with people. And so I think that was like the first pivotal moment in my career, Edith, if I'm just being honest. And then the second one came when I finished grad school and I was focusing in HR management. But one of my professors, Dr. Christopher Lee, said he pulled like the top 4 students to the side. And I wasn't number 1 or number 2, but I wasn't number 4 either. And he said, "You
Well
want?"
done, Donald.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a little
Look that
happy.
out for that.
Um, but Dr. Lee said, listen, you need to go get business experience. The 4 of you need to go get business experience. Everybody else is talking about HR having a seat at the table. The seat doesn't make you valuable. What you contribute when you're in the room is what makes you valuable. So you need to go understand the business if you want to impact and influence the business. And so I went and led a team of account executives for nearly 3.5 years before pivoting back. And it shaped me so much, Edith, because now I try to be the people partner to the business that I wanted when I was in the business. So it's not about things being black and white or these are the rules. You got to have to do it this way. It's like, no, no, no. How can I be accelerator to growth, both for the business and for the people in the business? And I don't want to be viewed as a barrier. And I don't want my team viewed as barriers. I want them to be viewed as like accelerators. And so all of those things really helped shape me early on. Um, and, my CTO now, Michael Booth, today's his birthday. So happy birthday, Booth. Uh, he has validated for me that those moments have made me a better partner for him in his business. And so I'm thankful for those leaders that poured into me early on.
Yeah, well, it's so terrific that you're sharing their names and highlighting how important they were. They were part of your medleys, and it sounds like you've had many medleys along the way that have contributed to your learning, that have broadened your perspective, that have positioned you to do the same going forward. You mentioned as an HR executive how important it is to have the context in which you operate, which is whatever business you are working with. I wonder whether it feels different now with respect to, this people first philosophy that historically has been owned. I might add incredibly well with the expertise in HR, but now is positioned differently as executives broadly realize that part of their job is also to be part of a people first philosophy. Have you seen an evolution in the way people are thinking about talent as humans?
Absolutely. I've definitely seen things evolve. I do want to make sure I call out that I do believe some companies and their environments and some of their leaders may be resistant to said evolution.
Good point.
Right?
Great
So
point.
I do want to call that out. But yes, I have seen that evolution. Look, I think 2 things I always tell people, and it is completely baked by my experiences in the past, which is everybody's in the people business and everybody's in sales. And there's leaders now that understand that, oh, we really are in the people business, because they're realizing that you won't be able to retain top talent if you don't develop them. And you can't just have performance conversations once or twice a year. Like folks want to know how they're trending for their career trajectory. And when you look at like this multi-generational workforce now, they're holding companies accountable now more than they did before, because they've seen their parents be mistreated. They've seen their grandparents be mistreated in the workplace. And they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. So yes, I've seen the evolution of focusing on people. The other thing I'd call out, Edith, is that I think right now this is like the gold rush for our profession,
It
because
does
we're
that way.
seeing, yeah, it's this gold rush. This is definitely the gold rush. It's look, you got social unrest, you got pandemics that were global, you got macro economy, you got people that are saying these aren't benefits anymore, these are essentials. This is what I need to be able to have a quality of life. You have folks that are now, because of the pandemic, you can see people's children on a Zoom call. You can see people's pets on a Zoom call. Earlier today, my team saw the Orkin guy on a Zoom call. So that work-life integration has been accelerated. So it's forcing this conversation. I call it positive tension. It's forcing companies to have to realize and come to grapples with, what role do we want to play when it comes to improving the lives of our employees. And I've always subscribed to, if you improve somebody's home life, you will improve their work life. So what does that mean? Look at things like pay transparency laws, right? Like if historically underrepresented communities and women don't have to worry about being paid inequitable, they can go focus on the innovation that they want to go unlock, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the gold rush right now. I'm super excited to be in the space.
So I hear you and I agree with you. Talent is at the forefront. There's not an organization out there that doesn't have people as one of the major drivers, if not the major driver of their success. You commented on how inclusivity is critical to collaboration, innovation, and success in any company. It's a word that's often used in the context of diversity, equity, inclusion, inclusivity. What does it mean, and how have you seen it how do you put it in practice in a talent business like Greenhouse? And one other follow-up question.
Okay.
How do you think about the tools that Greenhouse offers, and whether those tools of evaluation of candidates reinforce an inclusive mindset, or maybe there's more work to be done there?
Yes, I can nerd out with you here a lot. I believe inclusion is an outcome. A lot of companies say diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. They put it on the same playing field. Some people say diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I believe is inclusion's outcome. At Greenhouse, we subscribe to inclusion happens when diversity, equity, and allyship are present. They all have to be present, right? So you can't say that you're inclusive when you start to look at survey data or employee voice data and find out that African Americans or members of the LGBTQ plus community or Southeast Asians are having a different experience at that same company than others, right? And that what I have found is like the allyship piece is important. And so we've tried to make sure that we do intentional programming around that and developing allyship behaviors, helping people shift their default habits, because none of us got to control where we landed on the planet. And so some of us may not have had the experiences that say they've been able to practice allyship behaviors. So that's the first one. I think the second thing I would say is, as it relates to the product, well, I think this is the topic of discussion right now, right?
Can I just pause you for a second?
Yeah.
I just assumed everyone knows what Greenhouse is and what Greenhouse does, but
Sure.
maybe just spend a minute on that. That would be great. A little commercial for Greenhouse.
That's cool. I like that. Greenhouse is the greatest hiring software on the planet.
Okay, he went large. That's okay. The greatest. Go ahead.
The greatest. And the reason why is because all of our products are centered on unlocking human potential, not just for Greenhouse, but for Greenhouse customers. And it feeds into the product question that you had, right? So there's companies out there, they consider themselves an applicant tracking system. Candidates apply, you're able to see those candidates being able to see the requisitions, that's cool, right?
Mhm.
But from a place of inclusion, like that's not what we focus on. We consider ourselves hiring software because what ends up happening is our products are built with diverse teams. And so that means making sure that if you're going to do something like a hiring someone, what does that look like on the front end to ensure that that people aren't asked illegal questions? Or how do you make sure you have structured interviewing so folks don't have bias inside of the interview process where it's like, oh, I grew up with Edith, so I'm going to automatically get the job? Or are you actually pressure testing people's skills and abilities in a consistent and equitable way, right? And so from that perspective, like I'm super excited that we have someone like Henry Tsai at the helm of building our product because his background as an Asian American is helping us uncover some of these biases that show up in other people's products that we're like, no, we don't want those in our products, right?
Mhm.
Or like our head of idea, Jamie Adasi, as a Nigerian woman, she helps influence the product. They pressure test the product. My team is the first users. We're customer zero of our product. And so having such an inclusive lens means by the time the general public is able to play with new tools or new rollouts or new products that we have, it's been through this rigor of inclusiveness. And I always tell people, it's like, even if you want to believe or go with another product that's out there, because there's other good products out there, go look at their leadership teams. You'll see if their inclusion is at work. Go see how diverse they are. Go look at their boards. Because what I have found is some of the products that have come um, made the headlines for not being as inclusive, or where candidates have said, no, I went through this process and there was a lot of bias in that process, where the teams are not diverse. So you can't expect their innovations to be inclusive. Um, and so that's where I think that we're at this point, this tipping point now where companies are really going to have to ask themselves, what kind of company do they want to be? Do they truly want to live up to some of the voiceovers and values that they've said about being inclusive? And if so, that means you got to make sure you don't have bias inside of your product. And as a person, I get to stand here today or sit here today and tell you this, like, to be named the first chief people officer is a phenomenal experience, at least for me, and I think for Greenhouse. But what's more important is I'm the beneficiary of our sourcing automation tool, right? That was developed by a young man named Steven and his team. And Steven is also an Asian American. And so when Daniel was looking for a chief people officer, he used that product to make sure that he opened the aperture for diverse candidates, but not for Steven and his efforts. We would not have sourcing automation. And if we didn't have sourcing automation, I do not get to sit with you today in the role that I'm in. And so I've seen what happens when you have a room full of diverse people shaping the products because I'm the beneficiary of it. And unfortunately, not all companies have the same diversity in the room shaping their products. And so I hope that shifts.
Well, I think it's super important that you've highlighted the colleagues in your organization who have informed the platform. It is super important to understand that every aspect of the talent equation has to be checked and evaluated. And one of the clear ways to do that is to make sure that people in those seats have an open aperture in their thinking, have broad perspectives, have medleys that are inclusive themselves, because they'll bring that to bear in the work that they do. So really, really terrific to hear. When we talk about, we're going to take a couple of questions. If people want to put them in the chat, we're happy to try to get to them. I don't want to miss an opportunity to take this inclusivity conversation and think about it through the lens of Black History Month. We have a few more days left, and it is always a time of year that we, as Black people, really welcome the opportunity to gather, to get together, to think about how our history has informed the strength, success, failures, joy, and community that has fueled all of our growth. And so let me ask you this. How do you think about Black History Month? Is it important? How do you celebrate it? And how do we all play a part in the Black experience going forward?
Yeah. Is it important? Absolutely. My mother, I will credit this to my mom. My mother, I'm the eldest of four, and my mother used to make sure that we studied, starting with me, Black history. My parents are divorced, and so she would take all of these significant African American humans, Black humans, and tell me about their excellence. And she'd force me to study them. So whether it was Lewis Latimer, or whether it was Langston Hughes, or whether it was Granville Thomas, like, she made me study them. And what she was teaching me was the importance of excellence. It wasn't something that I could learn in school around folks that looked like me, that
Mhm.
positively contributed to this thing called humanity. And so I grew up studying all of this excellence. And I'm like, so for me, it reinforced to me that excellence was possible. In fact, it defaulted to me that excellence was the norm. And so as I navigated life, whether as a student or even as a professional, um, it's those stories that I used as motivations for me to go figure out how can I achieve my own excellence. What I did not realize that she was doing subconsciously was that she was eliminating any of the opportunities that I would have thought excellence was not attainable. And she was eliminating this idea that if you turn on the television or you pick up a newspaper, you might not read about said excellence. And so she kind of created it as my default. And when I think about my brother, my middle brother, who's an accountant, or my baby sister who works in the government doing criminology work, and my baby brother who's a nuclear engineer, like, I tell people our occupations now because those are the things that we actually love doing and how we contribute to the
Yes.
team. But so many people are like, oh, like, how did you all get that way? And I'm like, oh, like, I see it now. I didn't understand it then. It's like my mom somewhat just created this environment that excellence had to occur. And she was going to make sure if you didn't see it or have physical proximity to it, you were going to read about it on the pages of history that she forced us to make sure that we read. So for me, Black History Month is a perfect reminder of the folks that have paved the way for me. I call them footprints. It's easy for me to navigate in the sand because I can see the footprints of those that came before me. And equally at the same time, I have a responsibility to create footprints for folks that may um, join after me. So it's both humbling and a responsibility that's something that I don't take lightly.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Donald. It also sounds like your mother's pretty powerful woman, and that she set expectations for you.
Yeah.
And the expectations were, as you've described, excellence. And living in a household with that expectation is I'm sure also part of it. When your mom said, "I want you to write a paper on this individual," I'm sure you kind of eventually sat down and did it and took it all in. We're talking a lot about the importance of gaining perspective, and you shared earlier about your world travels as a kid in the military, and we just finished talking about your Black identity being so critical to how you have thought about your role and responsibilities and the significance of contributing. Let's talk about how that applies to the work environment today. It's clearly a challenging environment. I like to say, actually, it's an environment that is presenting opportunities that you have to work hard at getting at. As a recruiting talent organization, how have you all met the pressures of the economy, and what thoughts would you share as a leader of teams in addressing some of the concerns that people might have?
Yeah. Um, the first thing I will say is our company recognizes that because we're in the people business, we don't have the leeway that other organizations have to mess this up. Like, we recognize that our folks will call us on the rug. They will serve almost like a mirror for us to
What
make
does messing this up look like?
messing this up. Um, Telling people that you want to invest in inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship, And then when the macroeconomy hits, you lay off the entire DE&I team.
That
That's
that
messing
that
up.
would be a mess up, a great
That's
example. Yeah.
messing up. Messing up is telling people that we want to create inclusive environments, but when we look at director plus, VP plus, or executive leadership teams, we don't see women representation in those roles. That would be messing it up.
Mm.
Messing it up would also mean that when it comes to the macroeconomic headwinds that companies are seeing today, that you don't run straight to just cutting people, or what most folks are doing, which is running straight to layoffs, but that you have a conversation focused on trade-offs. What are the things that we're willing to trade to protect our people during this macroeconomy? And if it ends up resulting in a layoff, knowing that you've done and exhausted all of the other
Do the
trade-offs.
work. Do the
Exactly.
work.
Yeah. So that's what messing it up looks like. And for us, we're very intentional in that. I think the second thing I would say is there's a lot of conversation right now around compensation, around pay transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things I've realized, and I know our leadership team has as well, is transparency pays. Right? Like when we stand up in front of our organization and say, hey, listen, like these are some of the trade-offs we're trying to make as an organization to ensure we don't get to this point that you see other companies getting to. There's the social capital that's gained with people because you're transparent in that regard. It pays. Like we reap benefits from that. There's dividends on people's discretionary effort. There's goodwill that is formed. And so I think this idea around like making sure that we lead with transparency, even when the conversation, it may not necessarily be the most jolly or the biggest win for the org. The teams appreciate that. People appreciate that. Humans appreciate that. I think another one would be around empathy, right? Like
Yes.
not too many weeks ago, we saw a shooting in Atlanta, in the LA area, around the start of Lunar New Year. The impact that had on the Asian community inside of Greenhouse was huge because a lot of folks live there. To not acknowledge that is insane, right? To not understand that people's headspace may be somewhat derailed because of something that may have happened in their community. And so I think that acknowledgement, creating a space for support, creating an opportunity to demonstrate empathy, that level of transparency, it pays. And so my hope is that not only will we continue to do that, but what I'm seeing in the market, Edith, is there's a whole rise of people first companies where those types of leaders are seizing the opportunity of the moment, or what MLK would say, the urgency of the moment, and they're
Mm.
leaning in on delivering for their people in those moments. And so I think that is creating quite a new medley, if you will, between employers and employees. And I think that's a positive thing.
Thank you so much for sharing those comments, and so agree with the fact that if you come in real and you share your honest perspective and you listen, not just to what people in your organization are saying, but if you're observing your people as you do your customers, you won't just talk about being a people first organization. You will be that. We have one more minute, so I'll conclude with the question around what's next. What's top of mind for you for the rest of the year? And maybe I could ask you for two things in your life, but break that down to two things in your life, which involves work and which involves your family.
Yeah. I'll start with work and save the best for last because my family is
Excellent.
very near and dear to me. What's
We
next?
all are going to want to meet Dylan, by the way. I'm just saying. Just let him know we're coming his way.
There we go. There we go. I think from a work perspective, it's strengthening our organization, focusing on our people and trying to figure out how we can continuously develop them, and making our people our competitive advantage. I tell our one of our co-founders, his name is John, and he's very passionate about the product because he too understands what it felt like to work in environments and work with tools that were not as inclusive. And so I have this thing with John that I say is I say, the product is great, phenomenal. Like I've benefited from it. And equally at the same time, I look forward to the day that both customers, prospects, and folks looking to join a new company will know so much about Greenhouse because of our people that that's what it leads with. I want our culture to be so contagious and the thought leadership that we provide in the space to be so welcomed and some of the things that we're doing for our people to be so coveted that they'll be like, OMG, like I know, I love those folks from Greenhouse. And then they'll be like, what do you guys do again? And then we'll
Yeah,
be like, oh, we're hiring software. Like that's what's next for me is like
that's wonderful.
doubling down on our people from a work perspective. I think from a family perspective, well, this is where it gets really interesting because we're at a super moment in my family where my wife's in pharmacy, and so she will finish all of those rotations in a few months. And so watching her bloom in her career is what's next for me. I've enjoyed being on the front row of the cheerleading squad for her. So I'm super happy for that for Ashley. I think equally at the same time, my son has a front row seat to see the impact she's been able to make in a healthcare perspective and vaccinating people and prioritizing people from that perspective. And he gets to see his father, hopefully helping people unlock their potential by creating environments where people can thrive. And so I think what's next for him is he has a podcast that he wants to start.
Oh my.
Yes, and he wants to share that. Him and his friends want to get together and share some of the observations as kids that they've taken away from their parents. And that's going to be interesting for me because I'm sure I haven't gotten it right all the time, Edith, by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm excited that he wants to then create a space for him and his friends to share that. And the thought process behind it was some kids may not be able to have those types of observations of their parents. The parents may not be here, they may not be around. And so how can he provide encouragement to them in a medium that is both honest and authentic for him? So yeah, I'm super excited about that.
So Donald, thank you so much for joining me in this medley moment. This conversation has been super thought-provoking. How do you create spaces, I quote Dylan, where other people can learn from what he knows? And that's really what Medley is about, creating those spaces where we can pull together small groups with coaching to really kind of tease out some of these things that are really important to being human across all dimensions of one's life. And I'll conclude with the answer to Camille asked the questions about how do you start and influence conversations in the workplace before they get to the most senior ranks of the organization. First of all, you have the answer in the question. Start it where you are. Start it with, you think about it yourself. And I think joining us in this conversation is an example of that. But start to have these conversations, start to think about how you as an individual can really evolve your thinking and how through dialogue, connection, and intentional focus, you will be part of creating the future dynamic. So thank you again, Donald, and for everyone who has joined us live on the call, but listen in after the fact. It's been a super pleasure getting to know you, Donald, and look forward to exploring this world with you in the future. Take care, everybody.